let's go straight into this. And we're going to start with our book over here, Duties of the Heart, which is a book that I hope that you would have ordered on Amazon. A lot of people told me that they did already order this book. It's a classic work, 13th century, by Rabbi Vigler, one of the most brilliant Jewish sages who ever lived. This guy had a mind like a IBM computer, just so incredibly analytical and organized. Doesn't leave a stone unturned in his analysis. And what we're doing is that we are working. We're actually on, if you happen to have the book, then we are on page 353 in this little book. I would highly encourage you to buy it on Amazon.com, Duties of the Heart by Feldheim Publishers. See this little logo? That's the Feldheim Publishing logo, Duties of the Heart. And this book will most likely change your life. Warning. I mean, it certainly changed mine, and it certainly changed the lives of at least 4 or 5 people that I recommended the book to who are going through challenging times, whether it's financially or emotionally or health. And I think it will change yours too. Certainly during this quarantine, it's very appropriate for us to learn this book. So what we're learning so far in the book on page 353, if you have the book, follow along. If you don't have the book, then just listen along. We're learning about the advantage of a person who trusts in God. He has pure peace and serenity. He has nothing to worry about. Everything is good in his life because he knows that wherever he is exactly where he's supposed to be. And he knows that whatever he has is exactly what he needs. And whatever he doesn't have is whatever he does not need. So if it's a medical condition, he knows that this is what he's supposed to have right now. He doesn't feel bad about himself. The Jew that trusts in God, I'm not talking about faith, I'm talking about trust right now. The Jew that trusts in God has no regrets. He has no if-only moments. Everything is exactly where it's supposed to be. And I'm always reminded of Joseph. In the biblical story of Genesis, the second half of the book of Genesis, Joseph, wherever he was cheerful. Wherever he was always cheerful. He was sold by his brothers into slavery. He was at the bottom of a pit. He was working as a slave of an Egyptian minister. It says whatever he touched, he was successful with. He wasn't feeling sorry for himself. He wasn't cursing the day that he was born. He wasn't complaining and kvetching and groaning and moaning. Wherever he did it with all of his heart. And even when he was in a dungeon, in an Egyptian dungeon, in the most worst predicament with 0 prospects of redemption, like literally 0 prospects of redemption. Anybody that loved him thought he was dead, and anybody that was related to him hated him. So he had no prospects of redemption, and there he becomes he becomes like the person in charge of the jail. He was so good at managing the jail that they said, you know what, we'll give you the keys. To the point that when he sees the government ministers from Egypt down in the jail, he says to them, why are you guys looking so upset today? Like, what's wrong? What do you mean what's wrong? You're in a dungeon, for heaven's sake. But his attitude was so cheerful. Joseph was one who exhibited and really manifest this idea of being able to be permeated and saturated with the perfect trust in God. Now, Joseph, when he met his brothers eventually, you know what he says to them? The most extraordinary, life-changing idea. He says to them, guys, don't fight amongst each other, because it wasn't you who sold me here. It was God who sent me here. Can you imagine facing your abuser and saying that to your abuser? It's like unthinkable. It wasn't you who sold me here as a slave. It was God who sent me here for a reason, to be able to provide sustenance for our family. I mean, Joseph is an extraordinary example of someone who doesn't even know the meaning of fear and anxiety, because he's so perfectly saturated and permeated with trust in God. So let's keep on going. I'm at the bottom of page 353 if you have the book. If not, just follow along. We're saying, Rabbi Vigler here is saying, he's saying 9 or 10 advantages of the person who trusts in God over the alchemist. Now, why exactly he brings the alchemist, I don't really know. I guess an alchemist was the perfect profession. The alchemist is one who makes gold out of garbage. This is, I guess, what everybody's dream was. It was like the most highest ideal was to become an alchemist, to be able to make money out of nothing, and to be, I guess it would be the image of what would make everybody happy. In the 13th century, it was probably how we view Hollywood celebrity status today. That if you become Hollywood celebrity, then life is good, then you've got everything worked out, and you have nothing to worry about. So that's probably the reason that he says over here why the one who trusts in God has an advantage over the alchemist in every single respect. So the first example that we gave last week was the alchemist needs for his work certain materials without which he cannot accomplish anything, and these materials are not available at all times. But one who trusts in God is assured that he has whatever he needs whenever he needs it. So he has nothing to worry about because God is always with him, and God is always watching over him. A second advantage, now we're starting today, of the one who trusts in God over the alchemist. The alchemist must perform certain operations and procedures without which he cannot accomplish his purpose. He may even die as a result of the odors and fumes, along with the incessant labor and protracted toil by day and by night. But one who trusts in God is safe from harm and can rest assured that no evil will befall him. Whatever comes to him from God brings him joy and gladness. He obtains his livelihood with peace of mind, calm and tranquility. As it is written, he makes me lie down in green pastures. He guides me beside still waters. So there's danger involved in the work of being an alchemist and dealing with all those chemicals. But the one who trusts in God knows that he has nothing to fear. He's always in the embrace of God. God is always hugging and embracing him. And therefore he has nothing to be afraid of. So there's no anxiety. Can you imagine living in a state where you have zero anxiety? It's the most extraordinary, beautiful place to live. You know, the stock market could be crashing down around you, but the one who trusts in God says, it's in the hands of Hashem. I'm not worried. I know that my sustenance doesn't come from the stock market or from the financial markets. It comes from God. It's a state of zero anxiety. Further, number 3, the alchemist trusts his secret to no one else out of concern for his own self. He's worried. But one who trusts in God fears no man, rather he glories in him. As King David, peace be upon him, said, I trust in God, I will not fear. What can man do to me? So the alchemist is afraid of other people stealing his secret. If they find out a secret recipe, like Coca-Cola, they certainly made gold out of garbage. They took sugar water and they made it into $1 billion company, one of the richest companies in the world. That's Coca-Cola. So what do they do with this secret? They have to lock it up in a vault, and apparently the only people that know the secret recipe of Coca-Cola are the CEO of Coca-Cola and the rabbi from Bnei Brak who gives us kosher certification, because the rabbi refused to give kosher certification to a product that he didn't know the that he didn't know the recipe for. The way they work at Coca-Cola, they say, well, certain divisions, only they know certain parts of the recipe. Nobody knows the full recipe. So the rabbi said, listen, you don't tell me the code, you don't tell me the recipe, then nobody's allowed to, then I'm not going to give any kosher certification to it. And that's what happened. Apparently Rabbi Yehuda Landau passed away a few years ago. He was the one who was giving the hechsher, the certification for Coca-Cola, and that's why he was allowed to see what the recipe in the vault, and he was the one who certified Coca-Cola. But that's true of the alchemist. It's not true of the one who trusts in God, because he's not afraid of sharing his secret. On the contrary, he goes up to the mountaintops and he shouts out, he says, God is my savior. I have nothing to worry about. He's not afraid of other people knowing about his secret, because God is big enough to help every single person. I'm not afraid that if God helps someone else, then God won't have time or attention span to help me as well. Number 4, the alchemist has no choice but to prepare either a large amount of gold or silver so that it be available to him when he needs it, or only enough for a short while. And now in the States, he's worried, because if he prepares a large amount, he will always be in a state of fear lest he lose it one way or another. He's worried that it get lost, it get stolen. He will have no peace of mind. His spirit will not be tranquil, because on account of his wealth, he fears the king and the people. The Talmud tells us, Mar benechasim, mar bedaiga. If you have much possessions, you will have much anxiety, much worry. The more you have, the more you will be, the more fear you have, the more concern, the more worry you have. We always think that if I only had that car, if I only had that extra house, if I only had that yacht, if I only had that thing, this other, whatever, toy, commodity, if only I had this, that, or the other, I would be happy. And we all know that is a Baba Maisa. It's simply not true. If you had whatever you think you needed, you would not be happy. You would have one more thing to worry about. And that's what the Talmud tells us. It's actually ethics of the fathers. So if he prepared his possessions all in one place, then he would worry about it being stolen or something happening to him, maybe a fire. If, on the other hand, he only prepares enough to meet his needs for a short while, it may well happen that when he is in dire need of it, he will be unable to produce it for lack of one or another of the necessary materials. So if he's not worried because he has a small amount prepared, he's worried that he's going to run out of resources. A lot of people tell me about this, that they worry about the end of life, you know? They worry if they're going to outlive their money. It's an interesting concept. If they're going to outlive their money. I wasn't expecting to live this long, Rabbi, and now I'm at the bottom of my budget, you know? So what do you do then? You know, you have resources, you paste it out. Will you outlive your money? Will you not outlive your money? We're worried about these things, right? By the way, Brandon, thank you very much. Apparently, Brandon posted the book. And Mickey says that you can do a split screen. I don't know how to do that, Mickey, but that sounds awesome. How do you do a split screen? To follow Rabbi. Good. Brandon, thank you for posting the book. It looks like it's a free book. And we are absolutely in the Alchemist, comparing the Alchemist to the one who trusts in God. We're in the middle of the fourth difference. In my book, it's page 355. Brandon says it's page 357 in your version. But he who trusts in God, however, is strong in his reliance that God will provide his sustenance according to his will at whatever time or place he wishes, just as he sustains the fetus inside the mother's womb or the chick inside the egg, where there is no access for anything to reach it from outside. Sustains the bird in the air, the fish in the water, and the tiny ant despite its weakness, while the lion, the mighty lion, sometimes lacks food, as it is written, young lions are poor and hungry, but those who seek God lack nothing that is good. God will not let the righteous go hungry. This is actually the addendum that the Ashkenazim add at the end of the benching. At the end, and they say, na ra'isi gamzu kanti v'lei ra'isi tzadik nezov v'zara mevakesh lachem Hashem hozle'am yitain. I've never seen a righteous man forlorn. I've never seen his needs not taken care of. That's what we say at the end of benching. I've been young and now I am grown old. Oh, here it is, right here. I've been young and now I am grown old. I've never seen a righteous man forsaken or his children begging for bread. So this is what the idea is, that if your trust is in God, then you never, ever, ever have to worry, because God is always watching you. God is always catching you. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't have money. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't worry about being able to sustain yourself financially, or it doesn't mean that you shouldn't worry and you shouldn't go to a doctor if you have a medical condition or an investment broker. It means that you should go to all of the above, but that you shouldn't trust in your investment banker and you shouldn't trust in your financial stockbroker. You shouldn't trust in your doctor. Your trust is in God, and these guys or ladies are just your tools that provide for your needs. Sorry, that the blessing comes through them. That's all. And maybe it won't come through them, by the way. Maybe the blessing won't come through them. Maybe the blessing will come through somewhere else. I was reading a story last night to my kids. You know, with all this quarantine time, we have beautiful time. You know, we cleaned up the house yesterday. We spent a lot of hours. It was a family operation. We cleaned up the house for Pesach, and we found a lot of things that we didn't know we had in our house. There was this beautiful book called Akiva. It's about 400 pages by a brilliant German rabbi. He wrote this book about Rabbi Akiva. Brilliant orator. Rabbi Marcus Lehman is very famous as a very skilled writer. So I'm reading this book to my kids, and at one point Akiva was a worker for someone, a man by the name of Horkanus. And after 3 years of labor, he was going back to his family, and he came to collect his wages after 3 years. And the man told him, "Listen, I have no money to pay you." And instead of getting mad, Akiva said, "Okay." He shrugs his shoulders and he goes home. He wasn't stressed out because he wasn't mad at this guy for not paying him after all these years. He figured, you know what? God will provide. The attitude was based upon the notion that my blessing doesn't come from my employer. My sustenance comes from God. And it was a nice story. The story ended up in a nice way, but basically the notion was that Akiva wasn't phased. He didn't sweat the small stuff. He realized that my employer is only a conduit for Hashem's blessing, and if the blessing's not going to come through him, it will come through somewhere else. He doesn't get faced. Let's do another piece of here. I'm on page 357 if you've just tuned in. This is Souls on Fire. Today's Monday, March 23rd. Torah study, we're learning about the Jewish approach to fear and anxiety with 13th century work called The Gates of Trust in a book called The Duties of the Heart. Duties of the Heart. I highly encourage you to buy this book on Amazon.com just to adorn your walls in your living room, in your office. It's a very, very special book to have. Anyways, another advantage of the one who trusts in God of the Alchemist. The Alchemist, on account of his occupation, lives in fear and dread of everyone. He lives in fear and dread of everyone, from the king to the humblest of the people. But one who trusts in God is revered by the king and by the most respected of men. Even the animals and stones seek to do his will. As it is said in the Psalm, he who lives in the shelter of the Most High, from beginning to end. And as it says, in 6 crises he will save you, in 7 no evil will befall you, in hunger he will redeem you from death, and so on to the end of the chapter. So basically, he's not worried about anything. He's not worried about the king seizing his assets. He's not worrying about something bad happening to him. The one who trusts in God he just walks calm. He lives his life very, very relaxed, very serene, very calm, very happy. He has nothing to worry about. The alchemist is not safe from illness and disease, which spoils his pleasure and his wealth and prevent him from enjoying his possessions and delighting in his acquisitions. You know, we hear of stories, people that they work their whole career in order to retire, and the day they retired, he got sick. And a month later, he was dead. And you think, well, what's the point? What's it worth? You know, I worked my whole life to reach this point, and now he gets sick and he dies. It's like, what a waste of a life. But for the one who trusts in God, he's not worried about illness and disease, which spoils his pleasure and his wealth and prevent him from enjoying his possessions and delighting in his acquisitions. Because one who trusts in God is safe from disease and illness, unless they are in the form of atonement. Maybe he needs them. Or increase his compensation. Maybe it's for greater reward somehow in another world. As it is written, even youths tire and grow weary. Young men stumble and fall, but those who hope in God renew their strength. Isaiah. And another quote from Tehillim, for the arms of the wicked will be broken, but God supports the righteous. In other words, everything that happens to him, he knows is good for him. Gamzu letova. This also is for the good. Is an attitude that was exhibited in the Talmud with the man by the name of Rabbi Nahum Gamzu. A great story which I want to share with you. Nahum Gamzu was actually the teacher of Rabbi Akiva. He was known as Nahum. His name was Nahum. And he was known as Ish Gamzu, the man of this also, because everything that happened to him, whether it was good, whether it was bad or ugly, he would say, this also is for the good. Everything that happens is for the good. He would say these 3 words, Gamzu letova. This also is for the good. Everything that happened to him, this is for the good. Hurricane was coming, a drought came, bandits, doesn't matter. Gamzu letova. This also is for the good. He was so permeated with the awareness that God is in control and in charge of every single thing that happens at every single moment in time. He says, you can't fool me. This also is for the good. Everything that happens to me is for the good. Gamzu letova, and hence he got the name, the appellation Nahum Ish Gamzu, Nahum, the man of this also. Story goes that the Roman ruler, the governor of Israel, decreed some terrible decree over the Jewish people. I guess he was in Caesarea. And just near Haifa, I guess, and they decided to send a delegation with a bribe to appeal to the Roman governor, to rescind the decree. Who did they send? They sent Rabbi Nahum, who was the most pious sage of the time, the most celebrated, venerated sage of the time. He also was a little naive. He goes with his chest of precious jewels sent by the Jewish people. He stops up at an inn in the middle of the night, and he tells the innkeeper to please guard this chest because it's filled with gold and jewels for the emperor. The unscrupulous innkeeper hears about this. He says, don't worry about it, I'll guard your chest. And what he does is that in the middle of the night he replaces the jewels with sand. Long story short, the next day Nahum notices that there's sand, not jewels, in the chest. So he says, no, Gamzu letova, this too is for the good. Doesn't get stressed out. He goes to the emperor and he presents his gifts from the Jews, and the emperor opens it up and he sees a chest full of earth. And obviously the emperor's not impressed. He gets very upset and he orders him to be sent to the dungeons, to the gallows. What does Nahum say? Gamzu letova, this too is for the good. As it happens, Elijah the prophet appears in the form of one of the government ministers, and he says to the king, the Jews aren't so stupid that they would have sent you a gift to anger you. This must be something very precious. It must be the sand that Abraham used to throw at his enemies. When Abraham threw the grains of sand at his enemies, they would turn into spears and daggers and swords, and they would attack his enemies. They would kill them all. And that's how he would win his wars. Why don't you try it out? The emperor was intrigued, the governor was intrigued. They sent the sand to the front lines of the battle, and indeed, as they threw the sand at the enemies, they turned into daggers and swords and spears, and they were able to vanquish the enemy that they weren't able to conquer until this point. Of course, the governor is elated, and he calls out Nahum Gamzu. He thinks he's been called to the gallows, and he says, Gamzu Latova, this too is for the good. Until he's notified that he is released, and he's being sent home with lots of gifts and wagon loads of jewels for the Jews because of the wondrous gift that they sent him. And of course, he says, Gamzu Latova, this too is for the good. The decree is rescinded. As Nahum is heading back home, he stops up at the inn. The innkeeper is shocked to see him. And he says, tell me that anything unusual happened to you. And he tells him the whole story of what happened to him by the emperor with the soil and the magical soil, how it had turned into daggers. Now, the innkeeper knew where the soil really came from. It came from his backyard. So what he did was that after Nahum left, he knocks down his whole hotel, and he fills up truckloads and wagon loads filled with soil. And he goes to the emperor and he tells him the full story. He says, you should know, really the guy came with jewels. I was the one that filled it up with the earth. That magical earth was my earth, emperor, and I'm bringing it to you here. Of course, they tested it out, and the soil turned into just stayed soil. It wasn't anything miraculous. No Elijah the prophet here, and this innkeeper was killed. He received his just deserts. The point I'm sharing of you with the story here is the point of Gamzu Latova, which is a very, very important and fundamental point to take home today with you from this lesson. And that is like this. If we could only identify with that attitude of Gamzu Latova, this too is for the good. I don't understand how. I don't understand why God is doing this or how this is actually going to be good. But really, this is actually good. I'm just blind. I'm short-sighted that I can only see the here and now. I can't see the bigger picture. It's a little bit like an example that my father likes to use of imagine an alien was to come into this world, and he landed in an operating room in a hospital, and he saw one human being chopping up another human being with a knife. He'd think that we're horrible people, that we're a horrible society. What he doesn't see is the bigger picture, how this man is very sick, and he he paid the doctor to cut him open so that he could cure him from an illness. You know, when you only see one frame of a video, you get the wrong impression. So we who only see one frame of a video, we see only a bad event, and we think, oh, it's bad. But really, according to Rabbi Nahum Gamzu, his approach is Gamzu Latova, everything is for the good. If it's not good, it means that it's, like I always say, everything will be good in the end. If it's not good, it's not the end. If it's not good, it means it's not yet the end. Everything will be good. We just have short-sighted vision, and we can't see how everything is good. So I can't tell you how coronavirus is good. And I can't tell you how somebody passing away is a good thing. And I can't tell you how the market's crashing is a good thing. But I can encourage you to adopt the approach of Nahum Gamzu, which is to actually verbalize the words Gamzu Latova. I hope you write it down. Gam is G-A-M. Zu, Z-U. Latova, L-E-T-O-V-A-H. Gamzu Latova. If you can just incorporate this into your lexicon and actually verbalize these words when something good or bad happens to you, then what you'll be doing is exhibiting a trust in God that actually, as we're about to learn later in this book, the trust itself is what brings down the positive outcome. You see, when you speak badly about things, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And when you speak positively about things, it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you choose to be negative, and you say, abroch, or you say something which says, this is a bad thing. People have ways of expressing their frustration. If you express it in a negative way, maybe with a choice curse word, like a 4-letter word or something, then you are solidifying the negative energy. But if you say that this is the blessing of God, it's just disguised, Gamzu Latova, then you're solidifying the positive energy, and you're going to bring out the inherent good within this event to make it turn out good, to actually look, to be apparently and obviously good as well. So that's what I want to leave you with today as we finish this section of our Torah study today, which is the Jewish approach to fear and anxiety is, do not follow your gut instinct. Do not follow your knee-jerk reaction to just say, oh, it's bad. That is a myopic approach to life. It is short-sighted. Don't take that approach. Gamzu Latova, take a positive approach. Trust in God. God gives everything that you need whenever you need it. He doesn't deny you what you need. God is always watching over you, and he's waiting to see if you realize that or not. If you realize that he's over there, you blow his cover, he'll say, okay, he knows that I'm here, I can stop playing games. But if you don't realize that God is there and you think that this is really, really bad for you, then God continues playing the hide and seek game until eventually you'll realize. And that's, by the way, what always happens. Think about it, always happens. When do people come to find God? When somebody passes away, when real tragedy strikes, when the recessions hit. That's when people fill up the shuls, because when it becomes so bad, when you hit rock bottom, you have nowhere else to turn to but to God. You know that you're going to come to God eventually. And that's when things are going to turn around, as in the biblical history of our people. Every time that we descended into avarice and gluttony and sin, whenever we hit the rock bottom, we always found God. So why do you have to wait till you hit rock bottom? Just start with an attitude that Gamzu Latova. Start now, today, with an attitude. Gamzu Latova. This too is for the good. God is always in charge. God will never forsake me. God will never abandon me. I know this is going to end up good. With that attitude, you're going to blow God's cover right at the very beginning. You're going to fulfill your purpose. You fulfill your test right from the very beginning. You won't need to go through any more hanky-panky or any more games. You won't need to suffer anymore. You'll be able to blow God's cover, and you'll be able to reveal the hidden good in everything from the very beginning, instead of having to suffer and endure any more hardship. I hope that message is okay with you folks. I'd appreciate if you share your comments with me on Facebook here, telling me what you think about this idea. If you're okay with it or not, haven't heard any comments about it. Would be nice to hear how you feel about it, if you're okay with this concept. If you've just joined us, we're studying Souls on Fire. Today's Monday, March 23rd, and it is we're proceeding now with the Hayom Yom. Again, if you could post your comments, we'd love to hear from you. We're proceeding with Hayom Yom, which goes as follows. Today's the 27th of Adar 1, and it is actually the date in 1992, which was the last day that we saw the Rebbe. The very last day that we saw the Rebbe healthy, because it was on this day that the Rebbe went to the Ohel, to his father-in-law's graveside, and it was there that he had a stroke. And the only one with him was Hannah's grandfather, Rabbi Krinsky, who brought him to emergency care. And the Rebbe never recovered from that stroke until 1994. His holy soul left this world on the third day of Tammuz. So today was the last day that we saw the Rebbe in good health. And my parents actually received $1 from the Rebbe, I think a day or two beforehand. They were there to receive a blessing from the Rebbe. So it's a very emotional day for Chabad Hasidim, as we think of the fact that in 1992 was the last time that we saw our Rebbe, and we heard our Rebbe speaking, before he lost his power of speech. That was, 28 years ago. Really, really shocking. In any event, today's Hayom Yom goes as follows. My father said, this is the 5th Chabad Rebbe, truth is the middle path. An inclination to the right, to be overly stringent with oneself and find faults or sins not in accord with the truth. Or an inclination to the left, to be overly self-indulgent, covering one's own faults or being lenient in demands of divine service out of self-love. Both these ways are false. So basically, today's Yom Yom is saying, stick to the truth. Don't veer left to be overly indulgent. Don't veer right to be overly critical, self-critical. Be honest with yourself. That's the way to serve God. I see the ladies are commenting here. Lauren, love the message. Stephanie, love the concept, apropos. And Dean also, Gamzu Latova, you got it there. Thank you. Gamzu Latova, that's the attitude. I'm glad that you're connecting with this message. Certainly something which we'll be learning in Duties of the Heart. We have the power to change the circumstance around us. If it's a negative financial forecast, a negative medical forecast, whatever it is, we have the power to change the outcome, to make it apparently and obviously good by changing our mindset. So let's adopt the attitude of Gamzu Latova today to approach this corona thing, to approach this market thing and our personal problems with Gamzu Latova. This too is for the good. God is watching out for me. God will never abandon me. Today's second Hayom Yom, 27th of Adar 2, reads as follows. Bless Rosh Chodesh Nisan, say the entire Tehillim in the morning. Therefore, bringing this is the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh, this past Shabbos. Haftarah ko amar olat tamid. Okay, the Yom Yom is a little long. Goes like this. From my father's sichas, the sin of Aaron's sons. Aaron had 4 sons, Elazar, Tamar, and Nadav and Abihu. 2 of them died prematurely in the Torah, in the book of Leviticus of Vayikra, because they came too close to God. They brought a fire that was unauthorized in the Holy of Holies. And it was that fire, they basically came too close to God, and they experienced what we call kalais hanefesh, an expiration of the soul. Just like a little fire coming close to a big flame, it jumps over, the little flame jumps over into the big bonfire. When the little soul came too close to God, then the soul just literally expired. Now my phone is not really working because my phone is taking YouTube video, but I do see a message from Elaine Collins here who is saying, does this not apply? I think she said it because I came sideways. Does this not apply only to those that are completely righteous? And does this attitude of Gamzu Latova not apply only to somebody who is completely righteous? That's a very important question. The answer, Elaine, is no. It applies to every single one of us. And the concept is as follows. The concept of divine trust is as follows. When you trust blindly in God, without calculating whether God is great enough to solve the problem, whether God is strong enough to solve coronavirus, or God is strong enough to solve the financial meltdown, or God is strong enough to solve your particular problem, when you don't calculate whether God is strong enough and you just trust blindly in God, then the merit of that blind trust in and of itself, regardless of your merit or demerit, the blind trust in and of itself causes a reciprocal effect that God gives you a blind blessing without calculating whether you deserve it or not. That is the doctrine of trust in Jewish thought. When you trust blindly in God, then the merit of the blind trust in and of itself is what brings about your blind blessing, where God doesn't calculate about whether you are deserving or not. So absolutely is not only for the completely righteous. Gamzu Latova is an attitude that you bring upon yourself. It is that attitude in and of itself which brings about the desired result. It's an unbelievable approach to life. I've seen it countless times working in my life. I know it seems otherworldly, but trust me, friends, it is absolutely true.